This is Angela Blueskies, Creative Director with Heart of the Mother Retreats, and I am here today with my dear friend and beloved sister, Susan Menahem, who will be joining us in Peru in the summer of 2020 when we return there for our next retreat. And I'm looking really forward to this conversation and having Susan share a lot about her both personal and professional experience in connection with the medicine. And so, Susan, why don't you tell us just a little bit about you and your work and whatever you think is important for us to know?
Sure. My name is Susan Menahem, and I'm a psychotherapist, and that's what I do for a living. And I've been a therapist for over 20 years. I started out working in addictions, and after about 10 years of that, I started working with adults and couples and all different issues. I worked with kids for about 3 minutes of my career, and I know what I do well and I know what I don't do well. And so I don't work with kids, but otherwise I work with every other aspect of psychotherapy.
That's awesome. And I believe that you're also a shamanic practitioner, yes?
I don't call myself a shamanic practitioner. Rather, I lead shamanic ceremonies. I'm a pipe carrier of the Native American tradition. I don't carry my pipe in accordance with any one specific tradition. And I got the call to become a Native American pipe carrier on a vision quest. But I have studied shamanism and apprenticed with a shamanic practitioner. I guess I have been on the spiritual path. Now here's where you're going to be able to calculate my age. My first conversation with a spiritual teacher was August 8th, 1986. And I was in my mid-20s. And I remember that date as if it were my birthday, because it was a birth date, so to speak, because it was the first time that things began making sense. And from that point, I studied Kabbalah. I studied a lot of Native American shamanism, Egyptian shamanism, Jewish spirituality, until my meanderings took me to Peru about 8 years ago. And that's been a primary focus for me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit about some of the contributions of your work that you'll be bringing to the Heart of the Mother Retreats in Peru.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about that. So I'll be bringing my sacred chanupa, my Native American pipe, and we'll be holding a pipe ceremony. And a pipe ceremony it's a few things. It's a prayer ceremony. It's a ceremony where you get to speak to the spirits, whatever you define the spirits to be, and have your prayers taken by the spirits to be answered. It's a ceremony to be grateful. It's a ceremony to give back to the land. It's a very beautiful ceremony where we sit together and we pray together, we sing together, and we smoke the sacred pipe. I'll also be leading a Mayan flower bath ceremony, which is another beautiful ceremony. And that goes in accordance to the Mayan tradition, where we'll be using flowers and the petals from the flowers with water that's been prayed over. And we actually, we wear our bathing suits or shorts and a t-shirt. And it's actually a ceremony that cleanses our energy internally and externally, and the energy around us. It's a beautiful ceremony. People leave that ceremony feeling just like light, and like a little scrub brush came and cleaned you inside and out. It's a beautiful, beautiful ceremony. So I'm really excited to bring that too.
And something that's become, I think, essential in your work has also been supporting people in the work of integration with plant medicine.
Absolutely. One of the things that I have been doing, I'm actually now on a calling list of therapists that work with people who have had experiences with plant medicine and have a difficult time making sense of what happened in the ceremony and how to bring that information into their daily life and what to do with that. Um, so I've been doing work with people on assisting them in that area, and I'll be able to do that on the retreat as well for anybody who wants to sit down and talk or has a problem or needs some direction.
That's wonderful. And in fact, it's something that we find so important in this work, especially when doing really deep work, such as a retreat with multiple ceremonies. It's possible that so many layers can get peeled back, and so many personal challenges or traumatic situations can really start to be brought to light. And that can be really intense and difficult.
Absolutely.
And so it's one of the things that we at Heart of the Mother retreats find to be super important. It's not just a matter of opening up Pandora's box of whatever inner content may be there, but it's about really supporting people to make sense of each of those experiences in a way that leaves them feeling able to work with it and really able to continue to walk in their lives once they return home in a way that is both open and
Mhm.
stable.
And I do agree that that is really unique about Heart of the Mother retreats, because we do an integration, um, I guess I'll call it ceremony, after each medicine ceremony, but to have people there available on hand that you can just come to and say, hey, do you have a minute? I really need to talk, or I'm really having a problem with this, or I'm not sure what direction to take my next ceremony to, or can you help me with my intention, or this happened in my ceremony and I can't make sense of it, or I'm getting on a plane tomorrow and what do I do next? And to have people who participate in these retreats, um, to give them that opportunity to be able to process these ceremonies in the moment, so that when they go home they know what their next steps are. To tell you the truth, in my experience, I didn't have that when I was doing my first ceremony, so that's really unique.
I also did not have that when doing not only my first ceremonies, but for most of my early path with working with ayahuasca and San Pedro. And I was really lucky because I would come to Peru and stay there for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks at a time. And so I would have a lot of time to just talk with people in the community or talk to the people who were facilitating on my own. But I also have observed over the years just how many people struggle, or maybe they go a little too deep and end up pretty spun out and not knowing how to make sense
Right.
of those
Right.
ceremonial experiences and how that relates to this world and this reality. And that can sometimes cause a lot of harm. And so it's something that we find to be really important. And especially that's one of the reasons we really wanted you to be a part of this work,
Oh, thank
because
you.
we have so much respect for your work. And also my partner Helen, who contributes to this work, has recently finished her training as well. And so it's so important to us to make sure to have people who are both really deeply versed in the medicine work as well as deeply versed in how to support people in times of crisis in a way
Agree.
that is professional and responsible.
But I think, how to support people in times of crisis, it really helps to know that if you're in a crisis, you're in a foreign country. Everybody who you would normally go to is not available. You just had an experience with plant medicine that you may never have even um, experienced before, and you really don't know where to go or what to do. And there's somebody who's there, who's open, who's experienced and trained, who wants to sit down with you and talk with you and help you, and give you that direction. I think that's a big difference, is that, at least from my perspective, that's part of my expectation as somebody who's helping facilitate this retreat, is that I welcome, expect, and I want people to come and sit down and talk to me, um, and ask for help or guidance, or to assist with something that came up in ceremony that's confusing. That's my I have such a respect, love and honor for this spiritual path, that's one way I get to give back. And, as the Peruvians say, sacred Aini, right? Where I give to you first, and tomorrow we'll worry about me. And it's my way of just giving back and giving back and giving back. So I welcome and expect people coming up to me and saying, Susan, you have a minute? Can we sit down and talk?
I love that. And I especially love that you're bringing in this ever important idea of I me. And in the Andes, it's the law of the land, the acts of reciprocity that keep us in balance for giving and receiving.
Mhm.
And even outside of the medicine ceremonies, there'll be so many opportunities to work with elders and to connect with the locals and to
Mm.
experience these practices of giving and receiving in balance and living in harmony and respect with the land and with each other. Um,
Agreed. Agreed. And it's the locals are such a beautiful people. The land is magical. I'd never really had an affinity to mountains before. Believe it or not, I'm a girl from the beach. I connected with the ocean and the waves, and where I've lived all my life, we're really flat. There's no we are sea level. Um, but these mountains in Peru, I connect with in such an amazing way. Actually, in the plane flying from Lima to Cusco, you get to start to see the beautiful mountain range and the mountains popping through the clouds. And I always tear up and choke up. I feel like I've come home to my mountains. So um, people come on the retreat are not only going to develop a relationship with each other and with us, they're going to develop a relationship with this land and these mountains. And it's just magical.
Oh, it is so magical. And I don't want to get too off track, but I was just looking at photos of our retreat center today, trying to ponder the distribution of rooms as we've had our first people start to register. And what an amazing place. So there are so many places in the Sacred Valley where retreats happen. Pisac is a mecca of sorts for these kinds of things. And also Urabamba and Ollantaytambo further down the valley. But we're in a small village that has very few houses and very few people. And it's right up against this amazing mountain called Apu Pitu Serai, and the energy of it is so wild and raw, and there's a magnificent waterfall that just spews right out the top and rolls down the green lush hill. And it's an amazing place to connect with the land because it doesn't have a lot of tourists running through, and
Oh,
the retreat groups there are usually fairly small. So the land where we will be for the biggest part of this retreat will be magnificent, for sure. And I can't wait to return to it myself because it's become something that's so familiar to me.
yeah,
So, Susan, I'm wondering if we can get a little more personal.
absolutely.
I love it. Um, so, so many people, in considering coming on the Heart of the Mother retreat, may be thinking, well, I really want to come to Peru, but this plant medicine work, ayahuasca, San Pedro, I am a little concerned about that. That sounds intense. It sounds maybe even a little scary. And why would I want to do that? And so I wonder if you might share a little bit of your initial call to work with ayahuasca.
Sure.
Um, yeah.
So I had mentioned before that I did an apprenticeship with a shamanic practitioner, and then after that I co-facilitated his next apprenticeship, and it was in during that time where we had to stop the classes we were doing because he said he's going to Peru. I said, for what? And he said he's going to work with this plant medicine ayahuasca, and I said, what does it do? And he said it's a medicine that takes you deep into yourself, and it brings you visions, and sometimes you purge. And I thought, I would never want to do that. You're actually paying somebody to take you to do that? And I said, I respect everything else about you, but this sounds nuts. Have fun, and I'll hold down the fort till you get back. And he came back looking really different. His light was stronger, his eyes were clearer. There was just something changed and different about him. The following year, again, he said, I'm going down to Peru. I was like, you're doing this again? And why would anybody do this? And he said, I'm just being called. And I said, I love you and everything, but this is nothing I will ever do. There's nothing about this that calls me or anything. He went and he came back, and again, he was even more brighter and grounded and open-hearted and loving than he had been before he left. And I wondered what this ayahuasca stuff was about and what's going on in Peru. But I said, nah, this is not for me. And about 5 months later, I woke up with the thought, guess what, pal? You're going to Peru. It was that. I wish I could say that there was serendipity, and the angels sang to me and the clouds opened up with a road sign pointing to Peru. But it was just that very strong thought, feeling, sensation. You're going to Peru. You're going to this man, Diego, and you're going to go drink with this ayahuasca. So I went and I told this shamanic practitioner, guess what? I'm going to Peru. And he said, well, I'll go with you. And so 8 years ago, I got on a plane and flew to Peru to have my very first ayahuasca ceremony. And my life has changed very much since that day, which, by the way, was 8 years ago today. And that was not planned. I just looked back. My first ayahuasca ceremony was 8 years ago today in Peru.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. My first introduction to the medicine was in a book that I was reading when I was in grad school. I was studying pilgrimage and this 21st century conundrum of seeking for meaning and seeking for our sense of self and a sense of connection to spirit, as our cultures have lost that.
Yes.
And so I was doing these international travels and deep research and really studying this. And I picked up a book that was part of my study, and this shamanic practitioner came to it in a way that was, kind of like the typical American way to do things, kind of like, oh, I'm going to go get this thing. I'm going to do this crazy thing. And then I'm going to come back and write about it. Very American, right? And I thought, man, there's no way I'm ever going to do this crazy thing where you drink this foul tasting brew and then you puke and have visions that are terrifying, and then you wake up the next day and you're changed somehow. I thought, that sounds crazy, and I also am never going to do it. And I went to Peru for the first time after reading this book, and I did not encounter it at all. I met amazing people, and I connected with the traditions of the Andes especially. But I did not hear about ayahuasca. I did not hear about San Pedro or ceremonies or anything. And then I came home, and this woman who I had met in Peru reached out to me and said that she had gone back and done these ceremonies during a retreat with the same person, Diego. And that at the time she was called to him because she was on the path of yoga, and this was really looking at plant medicine work from the point of view of like Eastern mindfulness traditions. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And she told me in depth about her experiences, and it sounded really, really amazing. And I also was sure I would never do it. And I filed away this website and this guy Diego's name in my mind, and went about my life and went about finishing my master's degree. And I did a lot more traveling. And then just before I was finished writing this massive thesis on pilgrimage, there was a big earthquake in Peru that happened on the coast in a town called Pisco that I had spent a little time. And I remember sitting in this coffee shop, devastated as this news was coming through that this earthquake had happened and so many people had died and so much destruction. And I decided that I would go to Peru to volunteer over the holidays after I submitted my thesis. And as soon as I agreed and signed up for volunteering with a particular organization who was helping out in this community with earthquake recovery, then the voice of spirit that I had come to know as the voice of reckoning said, and then you're going to go to the Sacred Valley and you're going to work with the medicine ayahuasca. And I said, what? Really? But I trusted that voice. It was that voice that had led me on the pilgrimage journey in the first place, and I knew that I couldn't ignore that. So I said, okay, and I reached out to Diego, and he said, oh yes, we have the community ceremonies every week. Just let us know when you'll be in town and you can come. Okay. And so then I went to Peru. I volunteered for several weeks in this project. I flew to Cusco. I spent a couple of days there. I found my way to the Sacred Valley, and then eventually I'm in this house
Mm.
uh, with this man who I'd been hearing about for years for this ceremony. And I remember thinking right up until the point where the cup was in my hands to drink, like, you can go anytime now. Like, you don't have to do this. It's not required. Um, but something deep in me knew that I had to be there. And I didn't have any particular reason. There wasn't anything specific that I knew that I had to heal or work with. I just knew that I needed to be there. It was the next step, and I had to say yes. And I said yes to it, and it changed my life in a night.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, my sense of interconnection with everything, like my relationship energetically with the land and the trees and the mountains and all the other people around me, was something that I always believed before.
Right.
But after having the direct experience of that, I knew that I had found the teacher that I had always been looking for, the very call that had led me on that pilgrimage journey in the first place, all around the world,
Mm.
hundreds of pages into research writing and also personal exploration writing. And then one night in ceremony, and I found everything that I'd been looking for all my life that I didn't even know what to look for.
Mm.
And so the rest is history. she
Mm.
she had me from the beginning.
Yeah, it happens like that. All of a sudden you find yourself there and saying, okay, I don't know why, but I feel pulled, I feel called to do this work at least just once anyway.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that my hesitance to actually start that path, uh, was based in fear, and also because I wasn't one of the people who had a lot of experience with working with plants and psychedelics or
Right.
anything like that.
Right.
Those things were never appealing to me. I was, like, coffee's too strong for me person. And but in working with the medicine, I knew right away that this was something that I had to do more of, because
Right.
it was the one thing that I couldn't back away from. Like, once you're in, you're in. There is no way out but through.
Mm.
And I needed something to really hold me fully present with the things
Right.
that I wanted to learn and heal. And thank goodness for that medicine, and thank goodness for the beautiful people who
Mm.
supported me along the way in that, especially Diego Palma, who has just left us a week ago.
Yeah.
Um, what an amazing gift to be blessed by healing with something so much bigger than we are.
Mm.
So I'm wondering if you will share with us um, something big that has changed in your life through your work with ayahuasca.
What's interesting is like I said, 8 years ago today, I had my very first ayahuasca ceremony in Peru, and that retreat was 3 ceremonies in that retreat, and however many ceremonies I've had since then, and I've lost track and count, I'll always remember those 3 ceremonies. Like you, I really, I really had no experience with recreational hallucinogenics or anything like that. So I had no idea what any of this was going to be like. And I was on a retreat with Diego, and I drank the medicine and experiencing seeing visions was scary for me. I'd never experienced that before, and I asked for help. Um, and the person who came to help me, I remember I hugged him and I said, I don't want to be where I am. I want to be where you are. I mean, he seemed fine, and I said, how do I get where you are? Because I don't want to be here. And he said, in order to get to where I am, you have to meet who you are and and heal who you are. And that's how you get to where I am. And that was a big message for me, because getting to that place where I thought everything is peaceful and fine and wonderful is not about running away from who you are to be something else. It's about running to who you are to be you. And I didn't really know what that meant and how big a statement that was, but I came out of my first ceremony with that nugget. Um, the next ceremony, I went in, I drank again, and I was afraid again. So I asked for help, and one of Diego's assistants, Eduardo, came to help me, and I said, "Get me out of here. Just get me outside." Now, the one thing in the lineage and tradition that Diego uses and used, and Heart of the Mother retreats uses so beautifully is music during the ceremony. The most beautiful music and songs are being sung to help guide you and assist you and cradle you and carry you through the ceremony, and that was happening during that ceremony. And I still needed to get out of the temple. I just needed to just get out. You realize very quickly you can't run from you. Anyway, he took me outside, and it was a very dark night. And Diego's land, at the time, the Maha Templar wasn't even built. They didn't have that other community. Beautifully manicured trees, flowers. It's gorgeous. It's like utopia. The grass is like standing on a grass carpet, very thick. But what I saw when he took me outside was a graveyard with tombstones. And I looked at him and I said, "I asked you to get me out of here." And I remember taking his little face in my hands and saying, "Have you ever done this before?" And he said, "Yes, yes, my sister, don't worry." I said, "What is this place?" And he said, "It's what you're manifesting." And what was most interesting about that is, prior to going to Peru, I was realizing that my life had stalled. It stopped. I didn't have any energy or drive. I didn't know what my next direction was. I was just kind of like a leaf at the mercy of the wind. Just wherever the wind blew, that's where my life was going. And I realized in that ceremony that, oh my gosh, I'm manifesting absolutely nothing. My life has no direction at all. And I said, this can't be my life, because my life has music and there's no music here.
Hmm.
Of course, he said, "Well, sister, let's go back inside the temple." He went back in and sat down, and I really processed all of that. Um, and then the last ceremony, and you see how how the three ceremonies make perfect sense. The last ceremony, the medicine took me way back to when I was an infant. Um, and I was laying in this crib or cradle, looking up at my mom and dad looking down at me with little happy, new parent faces on. And I remember thinking, boy, my dad has a lot of hair, because my dad went bald pretty young. But what this little baby infant realized is they are so over their heads and they have no idea how to parent somebody who has the interests and the personality, and um, somebody who's going to turn out to be as unique as me. They're in over their heads. So that image and that thought and that realization, believe it or not, healed most of my childhood. Whatever I was dragging around about not belonging or not being good enough or not deserving or anything like that got healed in that moment, because I realized that the disconnect I had with my parents wasn't because I just didn't measure up, but it was because they were in over their heads with me from the beginning. Um, and And so when you look at how those three ceremonies just connected, the nugget of you gotta run to yourself, not away from yourself. But when you run to yourself, you realize, I'm not really manifesting anything. Why aren't I manifesting anything? Because I feel really badly about who I am. Um, and I got the reasons and I got the healings in three ceremonies, um, with beautiful music and a lot of support. Um, and of course, I wanted to call my parents up and say, "I love you so much." And of course, they would say, "Is everything okay?" And and at the end of the retreat, Diego always said, you know, "So give yourself a little time before you run home and call people. Just get home and land." But it changed my relationship with me, my relationship with my life, my relationship with my family. Um, And that was just the first 3 ceremonies, my very first ceremonies with ayahuasca.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's really beautiful to hear how it all unfolded. And I think that this is something that a lot of people experience also when doing this work in a retreat format like this, because the first ceremony, especially for those who've never done this work before, the first ceremony starts to pull back the blinders and to lift up the rug, and all of the stuff that we tend to not deal with
Which
starts
could
to
be
get
startling.
absolutely,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So these things start to get air given to them, and from there, like, the medicine stays with us for like 3 days after the ceremony. And so if somebody goes to Peru and does one ceremony and then goes home, like, okay, all of that is still true. Like, the blinds are lifted and the rugs are raised and the air is moving, and all of those things have still been stirred, but it's really more possible to go right back into life as it was before. And the gift of doing this work in the retreat format is that before it has time to close up again, we go in a second time.
Right.
And then before that has time to close up again, we go in a third time.
Right.
And so each time it's possible to go deeper into the work and to see more and to understand everything in a continuum, and to understand the way that everything is interconnected within ourselves and within our relationships with others, and within our relationships with our culture and our traditions. And so it's much more possible to really look and see what is true, and then to be able to practice making new choices while in a supportive community of others who get it, who are doing the same thing. And then to ponder, like, what are the challenges going to be when I go back home? How is my life maybe not a fit? When I've stepped out of it, now how do I step back into it? How are things going to be different? And what's necessary in order to fully integrate that, and to see how it's going to change.
Absolutely.
Because that's the point, that, like, it's not just a wild bride. It can't just be a wild bride, but hopefully not, because it's not a lot of fun when it's happening.
Right.
But
I always say, don't leave what you got in the mountains, because they have enough of everything. They don't need the gifts you got. Bring them home with you. Bring them on, put them in your suitcase, bring them on the plane, bring them back into your lives. Peru's mountains don't need the gifts that you got. You can say thank you and leave an offering, but don't leave the wisdom and the insight and the gifts for your life that you got in Peru.
Absolutely. Super important. And so that is one reason why we take a few days after the 3 ayahuasca ceremonies have completed, and we do another ceremony with San Pedro in the mountains. It's a very different experience. It's a very different teacher. It's very grounding. It's done during the daytime and it lasts all day. And it's a wonderful teacher that helps to kind of ground in this world and open understanding into connection with nature and the connection with our own bodies and our relationship with the world around us. And it can really help to settle in all of those teachings from ayahuasca in a much deeper way.
Yeah.
And so we spend a whole day in the country, in the mountains, just being with the sun and being with the plant and being with ourselves in a really beautiful way, so that hopefully everything starts to sink in a little bit deeper. And then, of course, through connecting with sacred sites all around us, and being able to go to ones that are really off the beaten track as opposed to the ones with so much heavy tourism.
Right.
It's possible to just really hear the teachings of the land and these traditions in a much more profound way too. And the medicine is kind of the driving force behind this Heart of the Mother retreat in Peru, for sure. But it really is everything together. The ceremonies that you'll bring with the pipe and the Mayan flower bath, and the other deep work that we have with other elders, like we have Vilma, who's an amazing cocoa leaf diviner and medicine woman in the greater Sacred Valley area. And also our amazing teachers from Keros, Don Agustin and Doña Benita, and their wonderful son, Santos, will be with us, and we'll do despacho ceremony with them, and hoping they'll stay a little extra in order to do some teaching. as well, because they're really such incredible elders. We just open to all of the teachings of this land in such a more profound way through the medicine work, and the medicine work feeds the connection to everything.
Right. And the beautiful, I have been on dozens of retreats to Peru, and the beautiful thing that I get to witness every single time is the teachings from the beautiful and wise teachers that come along, or that we encounter, and the connections with the land, but the connections with each other. Because the most interesting thing happens. You get this group of 12 people who don't really know each other, um, and introduce themselves to each other, who are practically strangers. And as the retreat happens, the group starts to feel like it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And you sit around and you say, okay, is everybody here? We can't all be here. Oh, we are all here, because people are just becoming closer. And the beautiful relationships that happen between people and among the group as a result of creating this container together, creating this beautiful space together of support, of compassion, of companionship, of I know where you were last night because I was in that exact same place. And, who else is going to understand that but somebody who's been through it? So in addition to all of that, I think an advantage of going with a group of people and participating in the ceremonies and eating together and going on excursions together is the gift of what we can give to each other.
Thank you for saying that. I think
Sure.
that's totally true. And I will say, as someone who did not mostly explore medicine work through retreat with a designated group of people, that's something that I missed out on a lot early in my
I
path.
always had that. And it was
Yeah.
special and important.
And it's something that Helen also had a lot, as she would go to Peru and do retreats to work with ayahuasca. She would always have these deep connections with people. And for me, like, I would go and stay a much longer time.
Mm,
Um, and I too was able to form really beautiful, amazing relationships with people who were also kind of on a similar path of being there long term,
right.
which is also beautiful. But the kind of support and camaraderie and um, deep connection that forms through the medicine work, period, is
Yeah,
profound.
absolutely.
And being together with a group of people on a retreat like this really fosters such a beautiful sense of family, um, that I think can often extend far beyond the end of the retreat.
I have message boards with almost every group I've been on retreat with, even the one first 8 years ago, and we still communicate with each other. Um, and at the very beginning, my first few retreats, I was a loner. I wasn't the person who went up and hugged anybody. Um, I wasn't even sure I wanted to say a word to you because I didn't think you'd like me, or would you be judging me, or so. Um, so even if you go into it being afraid to connect to people and not wanting to connect to people, something slowly just happens where you just start feeling like we've just been through this big thing together, so we have something to connect over. And when you have something to connect over with people, it makes connection. If you're not one of those people who really want to be among a group of people or feel comfortable among a group of people, when you experience something like an ayahuasca ceremony together, it gives you a reason to be connected, and it makes connection easier, more beautiful, and actually something that you decide and you figure out that you need and want.
Thank you. So I'm curious if there's anything else that you would like for people to know about working with the medicine, or coming on retreat, or anything connected to the Heart of the Mother retreat in the Sacred Valley in 2020.
Well, you know how I feel about the music. So I have to talk about that. What I loved about, we've mentioned Diego and his tradition, uh, is this beautiful music that happens in every ceremony, and these songs that are sung in the ceremonies. Um, in my second ceremony, listening to them play guitars and drums and flutes and all kinds of things and sing these songs I'd never heard before, I remember thinking, I want to do that one day. I mean, I haven't even gotten through my second ceremony, and I remember saying, I want to be one of those people one day who can sing and play music in a ceremony. Um, but the music and the songs is like nothing you have ever been exposed to. The songs are a collection from different traditions in English and Spanish and Hebrew. Some are Icaros that actually come from the Andes and Peru. Um, and for me, it brings me back to the days where I was in elementary school and we sat at recess just singing all day. Um, the songs connect you to the ceremony, they connect you to each other. Um, and the beautiful thing is, there's a website that you can listen to all of these songs. Um, and if you meet people who have been in ceremony, either with the Heart of the Mother Retreats or Diego, you have these songs in common, and it's something that binds you and connects you. So something that I think is beautiful and sacred is the music that people are going to be listening to in ceremony and singing after ceremony. It's one of my favorite parts. It's one thing that brings me back over and over again.
I think it's something that appeals to so many people too. I I approached the medicine at the very beginning as a classical musician. I was a classically trained flutist, and when I sat in my first ceremony, this music started happening, and I watched my body start to sing in harmony.
Mm.
And of course, I'm like trained in how to sing in harmony, but I watched my body sing in harmony to songs that I'd never heard before, and I was thinking, what is going on? uh, but then after it finished, after the ceremony was over and I was reflecting, I realized that I had been living as a musician from the shoulders up for decades.
Mm.
And I could create beautifully crafted music, but I had lost my capacity to connect at a deep soul level with it. And I remember those first 6 months after the first ceremonies, I listened to nothing else for 6 months.
Me too.
Nothing else.
Me too.
Just that. In the car, at home, in the shower, all of my days were filled with these medicine songs because it was almost as if they started to stir the work in me in the way that it had
Yes.
been directly in ceremony. And so um, when I found myself back in Peru half a year later after singing all those songs, it was such a different thing because I had learned them. They
Mm-hmm.
had become intimate friends. And so it was
Right.
beautiful to be able to sit in the ceremony and sing them on purpose by choice, not through some miracle of strangeness that I didn't know what to do with. Um, and I will say, for me, the most beautiful moments of my entire life are moments of sitting in ceremony and singing these beautiful songs with others.
I have to ditto that. I absolutely feel the exact same way. I think the most beautiful moments in my life have definitely been sitting in ceremony, singing with people these beautiful, beautiful medicine songs. It's nothing like it.
So I'm wondering if you have anything to say about who should not come to Heart of the Mother retreats.
Who should not come? Well, if you're on any type of psychotropic medication, did I say that? If you're on any type of medication for anxiety, for depression, things like that, you really have to make Angela aware of it, because if you don't wean yourself off of the medication, um, then you won't be able to participate in ceremonies. So what medications you're on is very important. Um, I think that if you're feeling pushed into it by somebody or something, I think that unless you're really feeling like this is for me, and I really feel like um, I need to take this step and I want to take this step, if you're not really feeling that, but if somebody said, ayahuasca is really cool, I think you should think twice about coming and make sure your reasons for coming are genuine. Um, and as far as, if you, I think I mean, people who have addictions, people who have traumas, this medicine is really good for that. So from a psychological perspective, um, unless you have, I can't think of something that would make this not appropriate for you. If you have a heart condition, that might be an issue. So if there's any physical issues, bring that to Angela so that you can review whether or not this is something that would be good for you. Is there anything that you could think of?
I think those are all really good points that you've made. I think mostly the only thing that I would add is if you're someone who's looking to try to just make everything better really quickly in your life,
Mm.
and you've heard that ayahuasca is a panacea for all the things and can be like 10 years of therapy in a night. It can be like 10 years of therapy
Yes,
in
it
a night,
can. Yes, it can.
but you have to still show up for that 10 years of therapy in the months afterwards. So
But
like,
that's the thing. If
yeah,
you're looking for I'm going to drink ayahuasca, I'm going to have some visions, and then my life, and I don't have to do any work in my life to make my life better, you're going to be in for disappointment, um, because you're going to drink ayahuasca, and ayahuasca is going to show you what you need to do when you get home if you want your life to be the way you want it. And then you have to expect that when I get home, I need to follow through.
follow through is huge. Absolutely.
But
We
if,
got to show up and do the dirty work. The
yeah,
ayahuasca
yeah.
can bring profound healing and
Mhm.
profound shift in awareness and profound connection to what is true.
Right.
And we have to then show up fully to do the work
Yes,
required
absolutely.
to clear the way for those things to be able to
Right.
become our reality.
Right. And I've heard people say, I want to go, I want to drink ayahuasca, but I hear that you're going to get sick and throw up. And yeah, but the difference is when you have food poisoning at home and you purge or throw up at home, you're getting sick. Or when you have a flu or a virus, you're throwing up because you're sick. Um, with ayahuasca, when you throw up or purge, you're actually feeling better. It's if you haven't experienced that, it's kind of hard to explain. But when that purge comes on, when you feel, oh, I need my bucket because I'm going to throw up, I can't wait. I cannot wait for this purge to come because I can't wait to get rid of whatever I'm getting rid of because I'm going to feel better right after that. um, and that's something that that people need to understand, that yeah, there's some throwing up in it, but you know what, you're going to want that because you're going to feel great afterwards. You're not getting sick, you're actually getting better.
Exactly what I was thinking. Like when you're sick with the flu or food poisoning, you're throwing up because your body is sick.
Yes.
Throwing up with ayahuasca, you're throwing up because you're actually getting well.
Right.
Yeah. Um, all right. So I have enjoyed our conversation so much.
As have I.
I'm wondering if there's anything else that you would like to say before we close tonight.
I think that if you're feeling a pull to work with this medicine, and we call it medicine because it heals us, um, but I feel like if you're feeling a pull to work with this medicine, it can absolutely change your life. I mean, I just brought up the changes that have happened for me in my first 3 ceremonies. If we had time and I had an opportunity to outline how my life has changed as a result of working with ayahuasca, you would think I was making it up because it's like the difference between night and day. So it's I'm in service to this medicine. I love the spirit connected to it. And I just look forward to being in service to the people who come on this retreat. It's going to be an amazing, healing, beautiful, wonderful, happy, hysterical, healing time. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it too. And we're so happy that you will be with us in Peru.
Absolutely.
We've both been in Peru so many times over the years, but we've never been there at the same time.
That's right. I've never been there with you. So that's
Yeah,
going to be awesome. That's great.
it will be absolutely wonderful.
Yeah,
And I know that. So I just want to thank you so much, Susan, for taking the time out of your busy day to,
absolutely.
to have this conversation and to share about your personal and professional experience with this work.
My pleasure.
And Again, my name is Angela Blueskies, and I am the creative director of Heart of the Mother Retreats. We created Heart of the Mother Retreats because we wanted to be able to bring people to Peru and other beautiful places in the world to experience this amazing plant medicine in a way that is loving and supportive and grounded and really responsible and respectful. And so if you are feeling the call, just as Susan had said, please reach out. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we'll see you in Peru. And I will close by offering the blessing that we often end our sacred experiences with in Peru. Ayumasi kunapa means we are all family in the Quechua language. So wishing you many blessings, and hopefully our paths will cross soon. Thank you so much.